Hey everybody, periodically I do a video that ties in current events into an illustration. So the last video that I did talked about how abuse is not a choice. In other words, narcissists abuse because they choose to abuse and it's a choice and it's a decision. Check that video out. There happens to be some current events right now that I think illustrate this very well on a global scale. So every once in a while, I like to point to something that's happening in the U.S. government or in the global news that illustrates, metaphorically illustrates a point that I try to make. So do not confuse this for a political statement. However, I do shoot these videos uncut. Sometimes some personal opinion leaks out. So that happens, just heads up. I happen to live in Texas. I'm conservative, but I don't really associate as being Republican so much as libertarian. And I'm generally not a fan of either party right now because I think they're both filled with shitbags. But I can't really do anything about that a whole lot because the rest of the country has a vote. So all that being said, the last video I did was talking about how abuse isn't necessarily a rational choice. Like, narcissists don't choose to abuse you. Like, oh, hey, it's 2:35, time to abuse. You know, by and large, I mean. There are definitely bad people out there that do. There are some real monsters out there. But as with everything else, there is diversity in the world, and not everybody is the same. So if you've come into contact with somebody that this does not apply to, that doesn't necessarily mean that this model doesn't apply to anybody. It may just not apply to your personal experiences, okay? And if that's the case, by all means, sound off in the comments and augment this video, because that's what I do this channel for, is so people can learn from others. So if you happen to have experienced a gap, sound off in the comments, let people know so we can combine some experiences and learn from each other. So the illustration I want to give, as of right now, current events are happening where there's a major standoff between the US and Iran, where a missile strike killed a top Iranian general. And it comes down to the U.S. Embassy in Iraq was attacked. Trump responded by missile striking the guy that orchestrated the attack. And Iran has just responded by firing 22 missiles at coalition bases. We'll get into all of that. There's a lot of, as usual, the population is divided. There's some people that are saying, you know, Team America, fuck yeah. And then there's some people that are saying, fuck no, no Team America, right? So, no surprise. And this is, the metaphor that I like to use these for, is because the public, the American left, the American right, is a perfect metaphor and illustration for splitting pathology. Because we're literally split. So they're splitting pathology, and so as the daily world events unfold, you see a polarized left, a polarized right, and it's an excellent illustration of the splitting mind, the polarized mind that goes to polar extremes. And that's why I like these illustrations. Now, the perception of the public and the opinions of the public are largely simplified because we experience reality by suppressing, not by observing. So by default, our brains are receiving tons and tons of input, and it filters out like 90 to 95%, this is not exact science, but it filters out the vast majority of inputs and limits it to only what is necessary for the immediate awareness of your surroundings. So whatever you're aware of consciously at this point in time, your brain is only going to allow through the filters just the information that you need. And the media takes full advantage of this because the actual situations are far more complex. And you can't sell advertisements with truth, unfortunately. The truth is rarely as interesting as a polarized, highly edited, barely true version of the truth. So I want to break this down. The way that there's two popular views. One is that they attacked us and Trump responded with big orange balls, and yay Trump, because there's no repeat of Benghazi, finally a leader that has the balls to stand up to terrorist attacks, all of that. And then there's the other side that says, well, but it was an attack, but it was not a big attack. There were no casualties. We repelled the attack. It's Iran, so we should take a more measured approach, right? Plus, let's not be so brash as to starting World War III without the input of Congress and without the input of the people. There's always the argument that a response can wait a minute. We know what happened and we know who did it. We can respond. We don't have to respond right now, but we can respond in time. So there's two sides to this, right? And both sides have their merit, and both sides have their disadvantages. As all things in life, it's a mixture of good and bad, things you agree with, things you disagree with. But we've been separated into these two polarized sides. So let me sort of bring both sides together and see how the two compare, and we'll see where we end up. Okay. I try to think about the fact that, first of all, any news that I read is only a slice of the full pie, right? It's a pie of awful, and I'm only being fed one slice from the pie of awful, and one slice might taste better than another slice. So that's generally how I see it. I try to think of several things that keep me grounded. One of them is I have to assume that the people at the head of the government have access to information that I do not. So, number one is I don't know everything. The people in charge have access to more information than I have access to. Whether or not they know more than I do is an entirely different story, but at least they have access to events and information in real time that I don't. So there's always that. So whenever I try to make a judgment of something that's occurring, I recognize that I don't have as much information as the people who made the decisions that I'm reading about. That's one thing. And as more information comes out, we're learning more and more. So this video may not age well, but I try to envision what was occurring at the time that the missile strike happened. So envision that if I'm the president and I'm in the White House doing my White House shit, and then somebody with a bunch of stars on their collar and a bunch of little medals comes in and says, "Mr. President, the mastermind behind the U.S. Embassy attack is on their way to the Baghdad airport. We literally have a Predator drone flying over him right now with the car in the crosshairs. What do we do?" Now there's multiple choices that can be made here. Okay, and hindsight is always 20/20. Okay, so remove hindsight for a second and think about what you would do. There's a number of things. There's a response that was taken, which is they attacked us. We've got the mastermind in the crosshairs. Can we capture him alive? If yes, that's probably the way to go. I'm guessing the TSA does not have a large footprint at the Baghdad International Airport. That's just my guess, though. I've never flown to Iraq. It doesn't seem like a great vacation destination, so it's generally not on my list. When I think of vacations, I don't think of Iraq. I think of maybe Arizona with a castle, right? To quote Chris Porter, that's where I get that joke. So if we can't capture him alive, well, then what? Well, we can blow the fucker up, right? that would send a strong message of, you attack us, we attack you. Do not attack America. If you value your life, we will kill you back. You have to think about if these quote armed protesters, which we now know were militia, so they're not protesters, they are militants, they are soldiers, just not wearing military uniform. So it was an attack. It was at minimum a militia attack, but this is a legit military attack if they're using militants, and if the general from Iran happens to be in Iraq overseeing it. That's about as much of a military attack without wearing uniforms as you can get. So there's that. Well, what happens if we say, no, let's not be brash, let's not missile strike him right now? What is the fallout of that? Well, I can imagine easily a narrative that would come out of that says something along the lines of, is Trump colluding with Iran? He might be colluding with Iran. Perhaps he had a hand in this, because after the attack on the U.S. Embassy, we literally had the man responsible in our crosshairs with a missile ready to go. And President Trump says, no, do not kill him. He must live. He must make it out of Iraq. He must make it back to Iran. There would be that message. I'm sure the left would run with that. But again, these are just possibilities. I could see it easily happening, right? For all the tough talk that Trump has said and done, when it came time to push the big red button to kill the person responsible, he backed off and said, no, we need to protect this guy, right? So that would be a possibility that I could see. But what's another possibility? Well, we've got him in our crosshairs. Because he is an Iran general, we should probably take this to Congress. So just hold that drone tight. How much time do we got? Do we have enough time to go to Congress? Do we have time? Cutting it close? For those of you who haven't been following U.S. policy for your life, the U.S. Congress is not known for being expedient, efficient, and fast. Just put that out there. Not fast. Plus, given the nature of the situation and the length of the hallway that it would take to walk, it might take longer to walk down that hallway than the dudes drive to the airport. You might make it halfway down the hallway, and the dude's hopping in a plane. I don't know. I don't know these timetables yet. Okay, I'm just saying that's probably a possibility, and it makes sense. There's also the fact that the U.S. Congress leaks more secrets than it hides, seemingly, right? So there's always the concern for security. The more people you tell, the more likely a leak is bound to happen, right? So as you continue to bring more people into the know, then the gossip starts to leak out. Well, that could be a very real security concern, because the more people you tell, the more likely it is that somebody's going to tip off this dude, and then they'll get a preemptive response ready. So then you lose your target of opportunity. Not only that, but let's say that even that doesn't happen. What kind of message does that send to the world? As the President of the United States, who has the authority to make a missile strike, decides, you know what? No, let me just go ask mommy. I can't make this decision by myself. We've got to wait, and I just got to make sure that I've got permission, right? Because I don't want to do anything too brash. You could say that could be a message that such a behavior takes, or if they were to make that choice, that could be interpreted by more than one person to mean that. You also have to understand the nature of the enemy we're dealing with. These are people that are generally uninhibited to strap explosives onto themselves and go blow themselves up for their own beliefs, right? How do you intimidate people that are dying for the opportunity to blow themselves up? You can't really intimidate an enemy like that. A comedian, I think his name is Russell Peters, says, You can't intimidate people that say, what? You kill me? F you, I kill me. Right? You don't really have much leverage with people like that. So that would be another possible outcome. And then the last one I want to mention would be, well, what if he went to the UN and contacted the UN and was like, hey fellas, you know, we got attacked. The U.S. Embassy got attacked by some armed processors that seemed like they had quite a bit of military training. I think they were just actually soldiers. But we just got attacked. The dude that orchestrated the attack is in our crosshairs right now. Do you guys mind if we kill this dude? It's kind of a big deal because he's like the second in command in Iran. It's basically like their version of Mike Pence. You know, if somebody just missiled Mike Pence, well, I mean, would we miss him? Would we miss him? I don't know. Probably yes. Probably some people would. Some people wouldn't. You know, millions of people turned out for this dude's funeral. Or at least a million. Quite a few people. But I'm sure what we don't know is how many people did not turn out for this dude's funeral. Right? So, we don't know. Anyways, I'm digressing. For him to go to the UN would probably also send a message that the countries of the Middle East would perceive as weakness. Because you got a bunch of dictators, right? What do dictators do? They don't ask permission. They call their own shots, right? That's why they're dictators. Or peanuts, potatoes, but dictators is... Anyways, that's the kind of people that you're dealing with. You have to understand that there's the way that the U.S. Constitution is written. There's the way that we've set precedents. But you also have to consider the audience. The audience is brutal dictators that don't ask permission for shit. And if you want those people to listen, then you have to send the right message. So there's that kind of logic at play too. So all of this stuff comes together. We're dealing with dictators that generally never ask permission. I mean, hell, it's like, I gas my own people, right? And they laugh about it. So those are the people that we're dealing with. And do we want to piss those people off? Or do we want to send a message? Well, they're already pissed off because they just attacked us. We got the guy in the crosshairs. So all of these factors come together. And it comes down to this. And this is... so I'm tying all of this together for this. No matter what choice was made, people would still disagree. We would still be divided. The left would have their narrative, and the right would have their narrative. And as I said, the left and the right put together are a perfect metaphor for a disordered mind that splits. And so, nothing you do can be correct. It's always going to be a mistake. You know, do we send a message of weakness? Do we send a message of possible Iranian collusion? Do we send a strong, explosive message that risks conflict in World War III? What do we do? Well, there's no happy path. There is no happy path to pleasing everybody. There's not. So if there's no happy path, then you have to just make a choice and go with it. And in this case, my opinion, I think the U.S. went with the choice that sends the strongest message to the Middle East and to all the dictators out there. So not just Iran, but every other dictator that's out there in the world. We got a few. Don't attack our embassies, or we'll send a missile up your ass. And if you respond, then we'll respond back. But at some point, there has to be some restraint and concern. And world leaders and dictators, I kind of view them as the guys that are saying, come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. And then the rest of their cabinet are the people that have to hold them back and say, no, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Right? Sort of like flying monkeys, if you will. So all these world leaders, all these dictators together, they're all a bunch of puffed up dudes wanting to fight, And then the rest of the cabinets, they're little flying monkeys to say, well, let's not be too hasty, you know. And we're all just sitting back here. We have our left, we have our right, and when put together, nothing is ever correct. So we'll see what continues to happen with Iran and the U.S. I'll put this out there. I personally think that this is the end of it, but we'll see. There's already reports in the U.S. that somebody in Iran tipped off the U.S. so we were able to evacuate our U.S. troops in time before the missiles hit, and the missiles actually didn't really. And we'll find out. But right now the rumor is that Tehran launched the missiles basically as a show of power to its own people, and that somebody tipped off the U.S. as saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to fire some missiles, but they're not going to hit any of your stuff. You can evacuate your people for now. There's all these rumors, so we'll see what actually happens and what shakes out of it. But again, the point of all of this is there are no correct decisions when the observations are split. When things are being observed through a splitting mind, no choice is the right choice. Every choice you make is the wrong choice. Even if you think it was the correct choice, and even when you try to explain it, I'm sure at least a few dozen of you listen to this video. If you're still here, congratulations to you. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying, and that's fine. That's what we want. You don't have to agree with it. Fair enough. As long as we understand the complexities of the situation, and we understand that we have different views, then I think we can make some progress. Anyways, I've talked long enough. My exit's coming up. So thank you very much. Please check out my Facebook group. It's Narcissistectomy on Facebook. It's a group. I'll put a link in the description. I don't always remember to do that. So if you're watching this video and there's no link in the description, just comment and say, dude, you forgot the Facebook group link. I'll put that in there. And we'll see what happens. Congratulations to you for listening to this entire video. I'm actually quite impressed. So if you watch this whole video, comment. $5 says this video never gets any comments. So thanks again. Please like, comment, or share. Join the Facebook group, and I'll see you on the next video.